He was one of the richest men on earth, but a small-town diner told him to wait like everyone else. Humiliated, hungry, and ready to walk away, Elon Musk made a decision that would shock an entire town and transform it forever. But what secret did that old restaurant hold that even he didn't see coming? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Elon Musk had grown accustomed to VIP lounges, private chefs, and the kind of seamless luxury that shielded him from the ordinary. But on this particular night, none of that mattered. Somewhere between a delayed flight, 3 back-to-back meetings, and a malfunctioning company jet, Elon found himself driving a midnight blue Tesla Model S down an unfamiliar rural road in a place called Pineville. The town didn't appear on most people's radar. It was the kind of place that existed in the margins of America, a place where time moved slower, where the streetlights flickered softly instead of blazing with neon. His stomach growled, long and low, reminding him he hadn't eaten since breakfast. He tapped his fingers against the leather steering wheel and muttered, "There's got to be something open." His assistant Zara had insisted he take this short solo road trip instead of flying. "It'll ground you," she'd said. "You're always solving problems for the world, but when was the last time you connected with it?" Now, with hunger gnawing at him and the fuel gauge flashing low, Elon wasn't feeling particularly inspired. Just tired. The headlights illuminated a faded wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Pineville, S8, 1891. A moment later, the sleepy Main Street unfolded ahead of him. Brick buildings lined the road like silent sentinels, their windows dark, the only movement the occasional flicker from a street lamp. Then he saw it, a cheerful blue sign glowing at the far end of the street. The Hungry Spoon. The hand-painted letters curved around a cartoon spoon with eyes and a grin, beckoning travelers like an oasis in the desert. Elon exhaled in relief. Finally. He parked right in front, noticing only 1 or 2 other cars nearby. As he stepped out, he pulled a baseball cap low over his brow. It wasn't arrogance that made him do it, just practicality. He didn't want the attention, the selfies, or the awkward glances. Not tonight. He just wanted to eat. The bell above the door jingled softly as he entered. Instantly, warmth enveloped him. The scent of sizzling bacon, fresh-baked bread, and something sweet, maybe pie, lingered in the air. Laughter and conversation filled the room. Every table was full. Locals from the look of them, families, couples, old-timers chatting over coffee, the kind of place where people still knew each other's names. Behind the counter stood a short, silver-haired woman with a tired but genuine smile. Her blue apron bore the words "The Hungry Spoon" and a simple name tag, Dodie Wilkins, owner. "Evening, sir," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "Just one tonight?" Elon nodded, already eyeing an open seat at the counter. "Yes, just me." Dodie's smile faded slightly. "I'm real sorry, but we're full up. Got a wait list about 2 hours long." Elon blinked. 2 hours? He pointed to the counter. "But there's a free stool right there." "Reserved," Dodie said matter-of-factly. "Called in early this morning. I can put your name on the list, or if you're in a hurry, there's a fast food place out by the highway." Elon hesitated. "Maybe you don't recognize me," he said quietly, removing his cap. "I'm Elon Musk." Dodie squinted at him, unimpressed. "You're who now?" "Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX. I'm trying to get humans to Mars." A flicker of recognition crossed her face. "Oh, you're that rocket ship fellow my grandson talks about." He nodded, relieved. "Well, Mr. Musk," Dodie said, voice steady and calm, "you can be that rocket ship fellow waiting 2 hours for a table, or you can be that rocket ship fellow trying the burger joint on the highway. But everyone waits their turn at the Hungry Spoon." For a moment, Elon stood still, dumbfounded. In Los Angeles or New York, restaurant owners would have thrown parties to get him through the door. Here, in Pineville, he was just another hungry man. His voice dropped, more frustrated now. I've had a long day. I'm starving. And there's a seat right there. Dodie didn't flinch. And I told you, it's reserved. What's it going to be, Mr. Musk? He glanced around. No one was paying attention to him. No whispers, no cell phones pointed his way. No one cared that one of the richest men in the world had just been denied a seat. Fine, he muttered, heat rising in his cheeks. I'll go somewhere else. Dodie nodded. Take care then. As Elon turned and walked out, the bell above the door jingled behind him once again, like a soft punctuation mark at the end of a sentence. Back in his car, Elon sat for a moment, staring at the cheerful blue sign through his windshield. Unbelievable. The burger joint Dodie had mentioned, closed for renovations. His only option was a sad-looking gas station nearby. Inside, the shelves were half empty. The sandwiches looked like they had survived several seasons of weather. He bought a bag of chips and a warm soda, then drove in silence to his modest hotel in the next town. That night, as he sat on the edge of the bed, eating chips and staring at nothing, Elon Musk, the man who was redefining technology and space travel, couldn't stop thinking about a tiny diner that had made him wait, and about the woman who had dared to treat him like just another face in the crowd. The hotel room was quiet. Too quiet. The soft hum of the air conditioner and the dim glow of the clock on the nightstand offered little comfort. Elon Musk lay on the bed, fully dressed, his head resting on a pillow that felt strangely foreign. It was 1:23 a.m. He stared at the ceiling, eyes open, mind racing. He should be asleep. He had a full day of meetings tomorrow, calls with engineers, investors, a government delegation. But all he could think about was Dodie Wilkins and that blue sign, the hungry spoon. It wasn't just the refusal. Elon was no stranger to rejection in his early career, but something about that night felt different. Maybe it was the firm way Dodie had looked him in the eye, unmoved by his fame, her quiet insistence that everyone waits their turn. Or maybe it was the subtle hum of real life in that diner, the warmth and noise, the way strangers laughed over mashed potatoes and clinked their coffee cups like they'd done it every night for decades. He sat up abruptly, the cheap hotel sheets twisting around his legs. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. The half-eaten bag of chips stared back at him from the nightstand like a sad reminder of how far he'd fallen from five-star dining. He reached for his phone. His inbox blinked with hundreds of unread messages, CEOs, journalists, tech partners, all vying for his attention. But tonight he ignored them. Instead, he opened his browser and typed, "The Hungry Spoon, Pineville." A basic website appeared. No flashy animations, just a home page with a picture of the restaurant and a tagline that read, "Home cooking just like Grandma used to make." Elon clicked through a few tabs. Family owned for 30 years. Glowing reviews. Best apple pie in 3 counties. Worth the drive. Feels like coming home. His curiosity deepened. He dug deeper, searching local news archives, Yelp reviews, business databases. The restaurant, it turned out, had been a staple of Pineville for decades. Through recessions, floods, and even a kitchen fire 7 years ago, Dodie Wilkins had kept the doors open. A few articles mentioned a scholarship she'd started for local students. One mentioned she fed people even if they couldn't afford to pay. Elon leaned back in his chair, stunned. Who was this woman? Why had she affected him so deeply? He stood and began to pace. His bare feet made soft thuds on the carpet as his mind cycled through possibilities. He could buy the restaurant, make an offer Dodie couldn't refuse. One call to his legal team and the deed could be in his hands by sunrise. He imagined her face when she learned her new boss was the rocket ship fella she'd brushed off. But as the fantasy played out in his mind, it didn't sit right. Something about taking over didn't feel like justice. It felt like ego. He paused by the window and pulled back the curtain. Pineville was asleep. The streets were bathed in moonlight, still and silent, a painting frozen in time. Somewhere beyond those rooftops sat the Hungry Spoon, its chairs stacked, its kitchen dark, Dodie likely resting after a long day, unaware that her simple act of treating him like everyone else had thrown the gears of a billionaire's mind into overdrive. Elon turned away from the window and returned to his desk. He opened a blank document and typed one word, "I," and then he wrote. Notes, questions, possibilities. His fingers flew across the screen, matching the whirlwind of his thoughts. What if he didn't buy the hungry spoon, but saved it? What if he helped it not just survive, but thrive, and took the whole town with it? By 4:30 a.m., he had sent 17 emails, made 5 international calls, startling some partners awake across time zones, and created a document labeled Operation Hungry Spoon. His heart raced, not with anger or pride, but purpose. He looked at himself in the mirror. His hair was a mess, his eyes ringed with exhaustion, but he looked alive. More alive than he'd felt in months. "All because she wouldn't give me a table," he whispered. The sun began to rise. Golden lights spilled through the window, casting long shadows across the hotel room. Elon showered quickly, dressed in jeans and a black t-shirt. Simple, understated. Today wasn't about status. It was about listening, observing, learning. He sipped the last of a lukewarm hotel coffee, grabbed his keys, and walked out the door. The Hungry Spoon opened at 6 a.m., and this time he'd be first in line. The soft chime of the Hungry Spoon's doorbell cut through the morning quiet like a familiar lullaby. It was 6:05 a.m., and the place had just opened its doors to a slowly waking Pineville. Golden sunlight filtered through the large front windows, casting a warm glow on the modest booths, mismatched chairs, and walls lined with fading photographs. The smell was intoxicating. Coffee brewing, bacon sizzling, and something sweet rising in the oven. It was the kind of smell that stirred memories of grandparents' kitchens, family breakfasts, simpler days. Elon Musk stepped inside and paused. No one turned their head. No one gasped or reached for a phone to take a picture. Here, he was just another early bird, another tired traveler craving a hot meal. And somehow, that anonymity felt good, grounding, healing even. Behind the counter, Dodie Wilkins, tough as nails, apron-clad and every bit as no-nonsense as the night before, was pouring coffee into a chipped mug for a man reading the local newspaper. She looked up at the sound of the bell and saw him. Her reaction was measured, polite. "Sit wherever you like," she said, nodding toward the empty booths along the window. "We're just getting started." Elon offered a slight nod and took a seat at the corner booth. He grabbed a laminated menu and scanned it, though his mind was elsewhere. The smell alone made his stomach growl, but it was more than hunger. There was something else tugging at him, a strange sense of anticipation. Dodie approached a minute later, pen and pad in hand. "Coffee?" "Yes, please," he said. Her tone was neutral, her movements quick. There was no indication that she recognized him from the night before, or cared. "And for breakfast?" she asked, already scribbling in shorthand. "Whatever you recommend," Elon replied, folding the menu and setting it aside. "The house special? It'd be the Hungry Spoon Ultimate. 3 eggs, bacon, sausage, home fries, and a stack of pancakes with real maple syrup." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You sure you can handle that?" Elon smiled. "After yesterday, I think I've earned it." Dodie didn't laugh, but he thought he caught the faintest curve at the corner of her mouth. "Ultimate scrambled," she said, jotting it down and calling it out over her shoulder as she walked away. "Hank, I've got an ultimate scrambled." From behind the kitchen window, a gruff voice responded. "Got it, Dodie." Elon leaned back and took a sip of the coffee she'd placed in front of him. It was strong, bold, slightly overbrewed, but rich in a way that made his overpriced lattes in LA feel hollow. He closed his eyes for a second and let the moment settle around him. Gradually, the restaurant began to fill. A woman with 2 toddlers took a corner table. A pair of older men settled in near the front and began a low debate about the mayor's latest pothole promises. A young waitress, clearly new, took orders nervously, and from the kitchen came the rhythmic clatter of spatulas and plates. Then Elon saw her, a girl in her 20s, dark hair tied in a ponytail, moving with confident energy through the dining area. She refilled coffee, greeted people by name, and dropped off plates with practiced ease. She wasn't just helping. She belonged. Her name tag read Penny, Doughty's daughter. He watched her closely, intrigued. The way she worked reminded him of startup founders he'd mentored, precise, adaptive, efficient. Yet her eyes, when she paused, held something softer, a sense of longing, maybe, or responsibility. As his breakfast arrived, delivered with a grin by Penny herself, Elon took his first bite, and everything stopped. The eggs were light and fluffy, the bacon crisp and smoky, the pancakes warm and airy with the perfect touch of maple. But it wasn't just the flavor. It was the care, the attention to detail, the authenticity. This was food made with soul. "This is," he started, then stopped, looking up at Penny. "Incredible." She smiled modestly. "Mom's recipes. Been perfecting them since I could hold a spatula." Elon chewed slowly, savoring every bite, and every word exchanged around him. Conversations flowed like water. Farmers planning their day, a teacher discussing a field trip, an elderly couple holding hands in silence. He was in the presence of something rare, a living heartbeat of a town. And it was fragile. Between bites, he overheard two older men at the next table. "Shame about that bank loan," one murmured. "Don't know what we'd do without this place." "The equipment's failing," the other added. "That freezer's older than me. Hank says it hums like a dying engine." Elon kept his eyes on his plate, but his ears sharpened. Every detail aligned with the late-night research he'd done. This wasn't just a business on the brink. It was the soul of Pineville hanging by a thread. As Penny walked past with a tray of coffee cups, Elon spoke. "Excuse me," he said, his tone light. "How long has this place been open?" She paused, surprised. 30 years next month." "You grew up here?" "In this kitchen," she said proudly. "Learned to walk between the tables." Elon smiled. "It feels special." Penny nodded. "It is." As she walked away, Elon returned to his food, but his mind was already elsewhere. The whispers, the worn-down equipment, the crumbling infrastructure beneath a glowing surface. The hungry spoon was bleeding quietly, and no one outside of Pineville knew. But he did now, and he wasn't going to walk away. The last bite of Elon's breakfast was nearly sacred. He pushed the empty plate aside, took a slow sip of his coffee, and allowed himself a rare moment of stillness. Around him, the restaurant pulsed with morning energy. Clinking plates, murmured conversations, the occasional burst of laughter, but none of it distracted him. His mind was locked in. Every detail about the hungry spoon confirmed what he had suspected during his sleepless night. This wasn't just a diner. It was a living, breathing ecosystem, a place of nourishment, not just for the body, but for the soul of Pineville. And that made it invaluable. Elon stood up and approached the counter. Doughty was there, wiping down the polished surface with slow, deliberate motions. She looked up, meeting his gaze with the same reserved professionalism she'd shown when he walked in. "That was the best breakfast I've had in... I can't even remember how long," he said, genuinely. Doughty arched an eyebrow, unconvinced by flattery. "We aim to please," she said. "That'll be $12.50. Elon handed her a 20. "Keep the change." Actually, he hesitated for the briefest of moments, then leaned forward. "I was wondering if I could talk to you about something, in private." Doughty's movements stilled. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What kind of something?" "A business proposition," Elon replied, his tone carefully measured. "Not the kind you're thinking. I'm not here to buy you out." Doughty crossed her arms. "I've had more offers than I can count, Mr. Musk. Big chains, real estate developers, even a group from LA wanted to turn this place into a themed experience. I turned them all down. I'm not one of them," he said calmly. "I don't want to change anything. I want to help you keep everything the way it is." Now that got her attention. Doughty studied him like a farmer appraising a storm on the horizon. Cautious, skeptical, but curious. Why? Elon didn't flinch. Because this restaurant matters. Because I see what it means to this town. And because I overheard more in this room than most people probably wanted me to. Her expression tightened. Eavesdropping, were you? Listening, he corrected gently. And caring. There's a difference. Dodie looked at him for a long, silent beat. Finally, she sighed. We close at 9. Come back at 9:30. I'll give you 15 minutes. But if you're pitching some high-flying scheme or offering charity, don't waste my time. No schemes, no charity, Elon promised. Just a conversation. She nodded once, then turned back to refill a customer's coffee. The moment was over. But something had shifted between them. A crack in the armor. A sliver of trust. Elon left the Hungry Spoon more focused than ever. The wheels in his mind turned like turbines as he walked Pineville's sleepy streets. With each step, he noticed more. The crumbling bricks of shuttered storefronts, the peeling paint on once proud homes, the fading energy of a town that had given so much for so long and gotten little in return. He spoke to a hardware store owner, an older man named Dale Peterson, who sat outside his closed shop sipping weak coffee from a thermos. 42 years I ran that store, Dale said. Then the big box opened 10 miles away. Couldn't compete. Do you think Pineville can bounce back? Elon asked, genuinely. Dale laughed, bitter and tired. From what? The factories are gone. Young folks leave and don't come back. We got heart, but you can't pay the bills with heart. Elon nodded silently, soaking it all in. Later, he wandered past the empty furniture factory at the edge of town, a relic of Pineville's past prosperity. The windows were boarded. Weeds sprouted from the cracked concrete. But where others saw a skeleton, Elon saw potential. He called his assistant Zara with a simple instruction. Clear my schedule for the rest of the week. I'm staying here. You're doing what? She asked, stunned. Elon, you have the NASA call, 3 board meetings. Cancel them, all of them. A pause, then, are you okay? I haven't felt this clear in months. As the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in watercolor shades of orange and rose, Elon returned to his hotel room. He set up his laptop, pulled out a legal pad, and began sketching out something entirely new. Not a product, not a pitch, a blueprint for revival. But first, he had to win over the woman with flour on her apron and iron in her spine. He had until 9:30, and Elon Musk did not waste time. At exactly 9:30 p.m., Elon stood once more outside the Hungry Spoon. The restaurant lights were dimmed, the last customers long gone, and the front door now bore the familiar closed sign. But the warmth hadn't faded. Inside, he saw Dodie Wilkins wiping down the counter, the sleeves of her blue apron rolled up, her movements slower now, a quiet weariness replacing the commanding energy she held earlier that morning. Elon tapped gently on the glass. She looked up, gave a tired nod, and unlocked the door. You're on time, Dodie said as he stepped inside. I always am, Elon replied with a small smile. The restaurant, stripped of its usual clatter and chatter, felt sacred in its silence. Chairs were stacked on tables, a mop bucket leaned in the corner, and from the kitchen came the distant clatter of Hank washing up. It smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the last hints of bacon and syrup. Come with me, Dodie said, leading him past the counter through a swinging door to a cramped back office. The room was no bigger than a pantry. A metal desk crowded one side, its surface buried under paperwork, faded photographs, and a coffee mug that read, I run on coffee and stubbornness. Elon chuckled as he noticed it. Dodie sank into her creaky swivel chair, folding her hands on the desk. All right, Mr. Musk, you've got 15 minutes. Elon remained standing. Before I begin, I just want to say, I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here because I see something worth protecting. This place. You. She raised an eyebrow. Flattery's nice. But flattery doesn't pay the bank. Elon's gaze drifted to a folder sitting slightly open on the desk. Inside, he could see final notice letters, utility bills, and something marked Notice of Default. Dodie followed his eyes and let out a dry laugh. Yeah, it's not exactly a secret. This place is hanging on by a thread. How much do you owe? Dodie hesitated, then reached into the folder and pulled out a printed letter. The bank wants $42,000 by the end of the month. That's just to stay in the building. The equipment's another mess entirely. Freezer's on its last leg, stove flares out sometimes. Health inspector gave us a grace period, but even grace has limits. She slid the papers across the desk. Elon took them, scanned quickly. And if the building is lost? Dodie didn't blink. We lose everything. Penny's student loans are due. Hank's only here because we pay him under the table. If we shut down, he's out. Most of our staff are part-timers who can't afford to miss a paycheck. I'd try to keep them paid as long as I could, but you see the math. He nodded slowly, then pulled out his phone, opened a file, and turned the screen toward her. It displayed a fully itemized renovation plan. Equipment upgrades, safety improvements, even payroll reserves and back debt coverage. This is real? Dodie asked, her voice suddenly lower. It is, all of it, paid in full, no strings. She studied him. Why? What do you get out of this? Elon paused. Honestly, because you didn't give me a table? Because you reminded me what it feels like to be ordinary in a world that keeps treating me like I'm above the rules? Dodie squinted at him, skeptical. I am, he said softly. Look, I know people like me make promises. We toss around big words and bigger checks, then vanish. I don't do that, not here. I'm offering an investment, not a buyout. You stay in charge. Your recipes, your staff, your rules. I just want to keep the Hungry Spoon alive. In fact, I want to help it grow. Now her eyes narrowed. Grow? I'm buying the old factory down the road, planning something big. If I'm right, you'll need a second location soon, one closer to where a lot of new jobs will be. Dodie leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed. This is a lot, she whispered. Take time, Elon said gently. Talk to Penny. Talk to Hank. I'm not going anywhere. She looked down at the papers in front of her. You want a table? Elon grinned. Only if I wait my turn. Dodie shook her head with a chuckle. You're one strange rocket man. Maybe, Elon replied. But strange can build miracles. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the ice machine the only sound in the room. Finally, Dodie looked up. Come back tomorrow, same time. I'll have an answer. Elon nodded, stood, and reached for the door. Mr. Musk? She called as he stepped out. He turned. No matter how this goes, thanks for noticing. The door swung shut behind him, but her words followed him into the night like embers, quiet, glowing, full of meaning. Morning in Pineville broke with an eerie stillness. The sun was just beginning to lift above the horizon, casting long golden rays down the empty main street. But something was off. The Hungry Spoon's usual morning bustle, the clatter of pans, the aroma of sizzling bacon, the hum of loyal customers waiting on the porch, was nowhere to be found. The door was locked. The sign on the front window, usually flipped to open by 5:55 a.m., now stared blankly back with closed in bold letters. A brown sheet of paper, taped from the inside, covered half the glass, its message concealed. Penny Wilkins stood frozen outside the restaurant, phone in hand, her heart racing. Her mother, Dodie, was gone. No note, no call. Just gone. She's never missed a single opening in 30 years, Penny whispered to herself, dialing again, straight to voicemail. Come on, Mom, where are you? It didn't take long for word to ripple through town. Mr. Peterson, who always arrived at 6 a.m. sharp for his coffee and cornbread, found himself pacing the sidewalk instead. A pair of retired school teachers knocked on the side door. Hank, the cook, who'd shown up an hour early as usual, peered through the back entrance in disbelief. Even the sheriff strolled by, concerned. By 9 a.m., the panic had snowballed. Dodie Wilkins was missing, and so was Elon Musk. Penny was fielding frantic texts and phone calls when she got the knock. A delivery driver handed her a sealed envelope addressed to the people of Pineville. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside was a crisp letter, typed and signed in unmistakable handwriting, Elon Musk. The letter read, "Today, everything changes. You've all been part of something extraordinary, even if you didn't know it. This town, this restaurant, this community, it matters. Please, meet at the Hungry Spoon at exactly 7 p.m. tonight for a surprise that will explain everything. Trust me. Elon." Penny read it 3 times before her knees buckled slightly. By noon, rumors were flooding every corner of Pineville. Did he kidnap her? Is he buying the whole town? I heard she finally sold him the place. No, this is a publicity stunt, right? Speculation spun out of control, fueled by the tension that hung over Pineville like a summer thundercloud. No one had heard from Elon since yesterday. His hotel room was empty, his car gone. The once friendly stranger who'd roamed the streets, asking questions, eating pot roast, and sipping coffee with locals had vanished without a trace. Mayor Gloria Hayes, trying to keep the peace, issued a short statement from Town Hall. "I am aware of the situation and urge everyone to remain calm. There is no reason to assume foul play. I believe we are on the cusp of something important." But the mayor's cryptic calm only deepened the mystery. By 6:30 p.m., half of Pineville was camped outside the Hungry Spoon. Entire families had gathered with lawn chairs and coolers. Local reporters had set up cameras. Speculation turned into expectation. Then, at exactly 6:59 p.m., the old blue sedan belonging to Dodie Wilkins rolled down Main Street. The crowd parted like a wave as the familiar car pulled into its usual spot. Gasps echoed. She stepped out slowly, alive, unharmed, but visibly emotional. Her apron was neatly folded under one arm. Her hair, usually pinned tight, was loose around her shoulders. She looked older somehow, as though she'd wrestled with time itself. Penny sprinted forward, tears already falling. "Mom, where have you been?" Dodie took her daughter's hands in both of hers and whispered, "I needed a day to breathe, to say yes." Before Penny could respond, the door to the Hungry Spoon creaked open from the inside. And standing there, silhouetted against warm golden lights and the faint scent of maple syrup and lemon polish, was Elon Musk. He wore jeans and a black t-shirt, no fanfare, no security, just a calm, confident smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, "Dottie and I would like to welcome you back to the Hungry Spoon, the new Hungry Spoon." Gasps turned to stunned silence, then murmurs, then a slow tidal wave of awe. The brown paper peeled back from the windows. Light spilled out, revealing something no one could have imagined. The inside of the restaurant had been transformed. Wood paneling glowed with warm lighting. The counter gleamed with new stonework. Framed black and white photos of Pineville's history lined the walls. And the kitchen, the very heart of the Hungry Spoon, shone with state-of-the-art equipment. Hank stood inside, grinning behind a new chef station, wearing a crisp apron he clearly didn't know what to do with. Dodie turned to the crowd. "Come in, y'all. There's a lot to see." One by one, the townspeople stepped inside, mouths open in disbelief, hearts fluttering with something they hadn't felt in years. Hope. And Elon? He just stood back, watching it all unfold, watching the town discover what one quiet act of defiance, a woman refusing to give him a table, had just made possible. And he wasn't done yet. The crowd inside the Hungry Spoon was hushed at first, awed, reverent, almost afraid to breathe too loudly in the newly transformed space. It was as though they had stepped through time, into a vision of their hometown they'd stopped believing in long ago. The cracked linoleum floors were gone, replaced by polished oak. The rickety chairs had been swapped for comfortable wooden seats with soft cushions. Even the lighting had changed, softer, warmer, casting a golden glow over everything, like sunrise caught in amber. Dodie stood at the center of it all, wiping tears from her cheeks as she looked around the place she had built with her late husband. "Frank would have loved this," she whispered. Penny squeezed her hand. "He's here, Mom, in every brick." Elon stepped forward, gently clearing his throat. "This isn't just a renovation, it's a resurrection." The words settled like dust in the still air. "Over the past week," he continued, "I've met many of you, heard your stories, tasted your food, watched your town struggle, quietly, with dignity, but struggle all the same. And I realized something. Pineville isn't just a place worth saving. It's a place worth investing in." Murmurs swept the room. Elon gestured for Mayor Hayes to join him at the front. The mayor, clearly overwhelmed, stepped onto a makeshift stage at the side of the dining room, where the pie fridge used to be. "I never thought I'd be announcing this," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "But starting tomorrow morning, the old Pineville Furniture Factory will officially begin conversion into a new advanced manufacturing facility for electric vehicle components. 300 jobs, state-funded technical education, and best of all, local hiring first." The room erupted in stunned silence. Then came the first gasp, a shout. "Cheers!" Applause. Penny turned in a slow circle, her eyes wide. Did he just say 300 jobs? Dodie nodded slowly, watching Elon with a look of disbelief, respect, and something else. Gratitude. "He's not playing around, honey. He's bringing this town back." But Elon wasn't finished. He pulled out a manila envelope and opened it slowly. "There's more," he said. "This isn't just about jobs. It's about legacy, about keeping Pineville alive for future generations. That's why, in partnership with Mayor Hayes, we're establishing a vocational training center in the old high school. Fully funded, free tuition. Classes start this fall." This time, the cheering was louder, raw, uncontrolled. Elderly residents wept openly. Young parents hugged their kids tightly. Hank banged a spoon against the stainless steel counter in joy. Dale Peterson, the retired hardware store owner, sat in the corner with tears glistening in his eyes. "Thought I'd never see the town smile again," he muttered to no one in particular. Elon stepped down, letting the joy spread like wildfire. Dodie made her way to the counter and rang the small brass bell that had hung there since the day she and Frank opened the Hungry Spoon. Ding, 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 3 chimes. The restaurant quieted again, as if it knew something sacred was about to be said. "This place has always been about more than food," Dodie said, her voice shaking. "It's been about family, about community, about sitting elbow to elbow with your neighbor and knowing you're not alone. And that's never going to change, no matter how shiny the kitchen is or how many big-shot investors show up," she added with a playful glance toward Elon. "We'll always be the place where everyone waits their turn." Elon chuckled, placing a hand over his heart. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Just then, a familiar scent wafted through the room. Warm cinnamon, brown sugar, and flaky crust. Penny emerged from the kitchen, balancing a tray of Dodie's famous apple pie slices. As she passed by Elon, she leaned in and whispered, "She made it fresh this morning. Said you earned it this time." He grinned, then sat at the counter quietly accepting his slice. The chatter resumed around him, joyful and loud, filling the restaurant with a kind of music Pineville hadn't heard in years. But something else stirred inside Elon, something more personal. As he took his first bite of pie, a memory surfaced, a diner counter years ago, a father beside him, both laughing between bites. That same pie, that same feeling. This place was more than a town reborn. It was a home rediscovered, and he wasn't done yet. 6 months later, the face of Pineville had transformed so dramatically that even longtime residents had trouble recognizing it. Once quiet streets now bustled with traffic and life. The abandoned buildings that lined Main Street had been reborn. New businesses thrived in spaces that had been shuttered for years. A small tech startup operated where the old hardware store once stood. The bookstore reopened under a new name, Page Turners, and Dale Peterson's grandson was behind the counter, helping a young couple pick out their child's first books. The factory was alive with motion. Hundreds of workers, most from Pineville, filled the state-of-the-art facility. Inside, robotic arms moved in harmony with trained hands, crafting specialized electric vehicle components with a precision that rivaled Silicon Valley. Tina, who had once relied on free soup at the Hungry Spoon, now led a team of quality control engineers. She had her dignity back. Her purpose, her son's future had changed. And at the center of it all, the Hungry Spoon thrived. Still the heart of Pineville. Two bustling locations, one at the town center and the other built right into the new factory, now served breakfast and lunch to a growing population. Dodie, though busier than ever, still insisted on working the counter at least 3 days a week. Penny ran the new location with the quiet authority of someone who had found her calling. Both women had become symbols of the town's resilience, living proof that legacy and progress could coexist. On the eve of the 1-year anniversary of the Hungry Spoon's grand reopening, Pineville prepared for something special. The entire town was abuzz. Banners stretched across Main Street. A festival was planned. Local musicians rehearsed. Children helped paint welcome signs, and at the center of it all was the most anticipated guest, Elon Musk, the billionaire who had, in many ways, saved their town. He arrived quietly in his usual understated fashion. No entourage, no grand speech, just jeans, a black t-shirt, and a smile as he walked into the Hungry Spoon and took his usual seat at the counter. This time, a reporter from Time magazine, Catherine Chen, followed him. "I've been chasing this story for a year," she said as she slid onto the stool beside him. "People still don't know why you did it. Why Pineville? Why this pie shop?" Elon looked at her, then slowly set his coffee cup down. "Because sometimes the smallest moments are the ones that change everything." Catherine tilted her head. "Still being cryptic, I see?" Just then the bell above the restaurant door jingled. An elderly man stepped inside, leaning on a cane, his eyes wide as he looked around the transformed space. "Little Dot?" he called out, his voice unsure. Dodie froze, then gasped. "Uncle Bernie?" She rushed from behind the counter and wrapped her arms around the frail man. "I thought you moved out west." "I did," he said, beaming, "but I read about what you've done here. I had to see it with my own eyes." He glanced around, marveling. "This place, it used to be the Lucky Fork, remember?" Dodie nodded, her eyes shining. "Before Grandma bought it, I remember." Bernie patted her arm. "She made the best apple pie in 3 counties. I taught her the recipe, you know." Catherine's eyes widened, looking toward Elon, who simply nodded, confirming her sudden suspicion. "That's the connection, isn't it?" she whispered. "You'd been here before." Elon reached into his jacket and pulled out a weathered photograph. In it, a young boy, no more than 10, sat at a diner counter, smiling, a fork in one hand, a slice of pie in the other. A man, stern but not unkind, sat beside him. Elon's father. "I didn't realize it at first," he said softly. "But when I came here that night and Dodie refused me a table, something stirred. When I tasted the pie the next morning, I remembered. That day, that meal. The only truly good memory I have of my father." He passed the photo to Catherine, who stared at it in awe. "You weren't just investing in a town," she said. "You were reclaiming a piece of yourself." Elon nodded. "I had the means to build rockets and reshape industries. But this was personal. I wanted to protect something good, something real." As he spoke, Dodie returned with a fresh slice of apple pie, placing it gently in front of him. "On the house," she said with a wink. "Even billionaires deserve a taste of their childhood now and then." He smiled, lifted the fork, and took a bite. The taste hadn't changed, but he had. Outside, Pineville's festival had begun. Children laughed, music played, lights twinkled down Main Street. And inside the Hungry Spoon, Elon Musk sat quietly, savoring his pie, surrounded by people who no longer saw him as a billionaire, but as one of their own. In a world where power often opens doors and wealth can bend the rules, this inspiring story reminds us that the most meaningful change doesn't begin with money. It begins with being seen, being humbled, and choosing to care. Elon Musk, a man who could build rockets and reshape industries, was denied a table at a small-town diner, and instead of reacting with ego, he listened. He stayed, and what started as a moment of rejection turned into a catalyst for transformation, not just for a restaurant, but for an entire town. Pineville's revival didn't come from a government bailout or a headline-grabbing initiative. It came from rediscovering community, from honoring legacy, and from investing in the people who make a place truly matter. In today's fast-paced world, where technology often distances us from what's real, this story challenges us to slow down, to appreciate authenticity, and to remember that even the smallest gestures, a seat denied, a slice of pie, a childhood memory, can spark the most powerful impact. So if this story moved you, if it reminded you of the beauty of second chances and the power of doing good when no one expects it, please like, subscribe, and share this video. You never know who might need this reminder today. And if you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, let Pineville be your proof. Sometimes being treated like everyone else is exactly what it takes to do something extraordinary. See you in the next inspiring story.